What's going on, guys? Tyson the Trainer here, back for another episode of Sports Talk. Last week we talked about creatine. This week we are talking about caffeine, another famously studied drug, one of the most popular drugs in the world. And yes, caffeine is a drug, and I love caffeine, right? I think a lot of people love caffeine. It's like, again, it's probably one of the largest antioxidants. That's actually coffee, the largest antioxidants that people have a day, but caffeine is a great drug, right? Now, caffeine gives you energy, okay? How does it give you energy? So basically, with caffeine, we have these things called adenosine receptors in our brain, right? These adenosine receptors build up during the day, or adenosine, I guess you would say, builds up during the day to actually make you more tired. And that's why if you don't get enough sleep, you haven't cleared away enough adenosine in the morning, and that's why you still kind of have that tiredness. And now I feel like I need to yawn. I actually do while I'm talking about this, right? So with that being said, what caffeine does is it blocks those adenosine receptors, okay? So it blocks adenosine binding to the receptors, which means it helps prevent neurological fatigue. So you can actually fire your motor neurons faster because you've got that interruption, okay? What it also does is clearly it does give you more of like a, an energy hit per se, but it's not direct energy. Like caffeine, how am I trying to explain this to you guys? So I talked about ATP last time, right? And then I talked about how, we have different forms of fuel. We have carbohydrates and fat. They are our fuel, okay? Caffeine is not our fuel. Caffeine is just an ergogenic and a performance enhancer. So it just makes us perform better, but it doesn't actually give us direct energy to use from, okay? If you have caffeine as a drug, there's no calories in caffeine, okay? We use our energy from our carbohydrates and our fats, but caffeine just helps us push harder neurologically, right? It kind of like stops, it decreases fatigue, okay? It increases our overall decreases RPE, so you can push a little bit harder. So it basically just blocks a lot of things in our body to allow us to be able to push harder, if that makes sense, okay? So with that being said, having caffeine, we know it's a performance enhancer. We know it's one of the best performance enhancers around that actually work. Now, caffeine doesn't just come in coffee. It comes in pre-workouts, as you know. It comes in energy drinks. It comes in non-energy drinks. So sugar-free soft drink has caffeine in it. It comes in dark chocolate. There's actually a lot of things we may not realize has caffeine in it, and that's why we also need to be aware of where. Now I'm yawning again. I'm yawning talking about caffeine because I talked about being tired. So we have to be aware where caffeine is, because the biggest thing we want to focus on when it comes to caffeine is making sure that you're not having it close to bed, because it will ruin your sleep. And if you have bad sleep, it's going to be a negative impact on performance. And everyone knows the habit cycle. You have too much caffeine, you're overstimulated, you can't sleep right, you have a shit sleep, you wake up in the morning, what do? You go and have caffeine and you go into this vicious cycle. And the way to prevent that is to reduce your amount of caffeine from your sleep time, okay? So ideally what you should be doing at least 8 hours before bed, cutting out caffeine, okay? Now everyone's going to be different. There are going to be some people who handle caffeine better. They have like certain genetics where they can actually metabolize caffeine faster. There are people who metabolize caffeine slower, okay? So everyone's going to be a little bit different. I can't give a broad statement, but as a general statement, keep caffeine as far away as possible from bed, ideally 6 to 8 hours, because that's what they found the half-life of caffeine is. So if you have 200 milligrams in your body at, let's say, 6 o'clock at night, 8 hours later at 2 a.m., you've got 100 milligrams because it's the half-life, okay? It hasn't fully taken it out of your system. So technically, if you want to have like a caffeine detox, you should go a week without caffeine to be able to cut it out completely. Otherwise, if you have a day without it, you could technically still have caffeine in your system because of the half-life. Now again, we don't know if it goes like half-life 100 milligrams, then another 8 hours till it's 50. We don't exactly know, but we just know the half-life is 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours, right? So ideally, try and keep that away from bedtime. Which means if you are someone who's performing in the afternoon, use carbohydrates as your fuel source for the most part instead of caffeine. So that way, I apologize. So that way, I'm going to keep this in anyway so you guys know I'm real and raw. So that way, at least you know you're going to have some type of fuel source, right? So 8 hours before bed, ideally. Caffeine again, because it's going to come in very many different sources. There's going to be caffeine tablets, there's going to be pre-workouts, there's going to be energy drinks, there's going to be coffee, right? So there's so many different ways you can take it. And if you are going to take it for performance enhancement, you want to take it about 45 minutes before your workout, okay? Or your endurance event or whatever it's going to be. Now, the dosing is going to be based on milligrams per kilogram of body weight. What they've actually shown, the best way or the best amount of caffeine milligrams per kilogram of body weight is between 3 and 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, okay? I would say even start with less than that. Like for me, if I have a double shot of coffee, I'm 90 kilos, right? So that's 180 grams, 180 milligrams for 2 milligrams. So it's 180 milligrams for 2 milligrams per kilogram body weight for me, right? If I have a double shot of coffee, which is about 200 milligrams, I'm sweet. I'm going to work out. I'm going to have a good work. And that's not even 3 milligrams per kilogram. So I'm on the lower end, okay? So start with like 1 or 2 milligrams per kilogram. And again, if you're a 60 kilo female or male, and that's being said, if you have a double shot of coffee, that's about 180 to 200 milligrams. That's 3 milligrams times your body weight, right? So you might need that dose. Then you can taper it up, go to all the way to that 6 milligram mark. For some people, it's going to be way too much. For me, 6 milligrams per kilogram would send me flying. So I don't have that. So again, it's very person dependent at the end of the day. I apologize that I keep yawning. I feel like as soon as I said that, it's just kept going, and I'm not going to stop this video now because I need to get through it. So with that being said, working your way up, so you can either try in the lower end. What I would say is try in the lower end, and as your mesocycle increases, as the intensity increases on your workout, as the volume increases on your workout, as all these things increase, maybe you should actually try and taper your caffeine up. So it's like, game day event, you're going to have 6 milligrams per kilogram, but the week before was 5 milligrams, the week before was 4 milligrams, or even through your mesocycle, it doesn't have to be game day event. Start with 2, work up to 3. So each week as a mesocycle progresses, you can try and go a little bit more with your caffeine to see what doses work for you. Because it's best to also trial this before you actually go into your competition with high amounts of caffeine, because if you're not really having much caffeine and someone's like, hey, take this caffeine supplement, you're like, yeah, sweet. You take a pre-workout, it's 300 milligrams of caffeine. You haven't had it before. You're jittery, you're all over the place, you can't focus properly. You're going to ruin your progress. You're going to ruin your game day competition. So always prepare ahead of time by practicing with the different amount of caffeine, okay? And again, when it comes to having caffeine in the afternoon or the evening, watch out for what foods have caffeine. So I watch out, like I have my Coke Zero or Pepsi Max, but I have the caffeine-free version. Because at the end of the day, the caffeine-free version literally has no caffeine. And you might be like, oh, it's only 40 milligrams, oh, it's only 50 milligrams per 250 mil, but that adds up really quickly. So keeping an eye out about where your caffeine is coming from, okay? And again, 45 minutes pre-workout is going to be the best thing for you. Try and avoid it before bed, and that's really the quick and easy thing you need to know about caffeine. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. Otherwise,